Gena, thank you for being willing to have a conversation with me today. We've been having this conversation off and on over the last several weeks about how to talk with people about race who actually disagree with you. And as we've been having the conversation in the office, we felt like we should probably share what we're talking about because it might be useful to other people.
Mhm.
So just kind of launching into this, Reggie, I know that you and Gena talked with Chris Owenby just about everything that was going on. And so some time has transpired since then.
Mhm.
And I know that both of you have had conversations with people. Talk a little bit about what you've experienced in those conversations over these few weeks.
It has it's been eye-opening. Um, Many people are in a place where I feel like we're willing to listen, hear, and understand.
Uh-huh.
However, at the same time, there are times when I hear, I just don't believe that's true.
Mhm.
I
Or
just
it's
don't.
not that bad.
Or right.
Mhm.
And and admittedly, you know what happens? Emotions start to rise.
Mhm.
Ah,
Mhm.
It- because you want them to hear it and understand it and see it so badly.
Mhm.
So it's at times, I mean, most conversations have been really fruitful and really helpful, but there are times when you just leave and it's like, I don't know. And it's not that you want them to change. I just don't know that they heard it or that they see
Mhm.
it or that they get it.
I
Gena,
think
yeah.
for me, it is even if you don't see it, respect that I do. And if you respect my perspective, I'm not saying you have to agree with it because it may not happen to you. That may not be a real fear, concern, or worry for you. But I need people to be open to respecting a different perspective.
Yeah. When you think about the conversation and being open and being willing to listen, do you think, I mean, one of the goals, hopefully, is that we actually could have a conversation about this versus me just telling you, well, this is what I think and this is the way
Mhm.
it is, and you just need to believe it this way. So, Gena, can you speak to, if I'm going to enter into a conversation and I know that the person doesn't agree with me,
Mhm.
what should I be thinking about ahead of time so that I can at least have a reasonably constructive conversation?
The first thing that comes to my mind is trying to find some type of commonality, um, whether you're a parent. And I think for me, I know during this whole time, how it impacts me is one way. But when I start to think about the impact that it has on my children, and that if we have a commonality as being loving parents, and we can have a conversation about how would you feel as a parent if something like this happened to your child,
Mhm.
then you don't make it as personal. It doesn't come across as an attack. You started with a foundation of commonality first. Then I believe you can have a conversation from there.
I've also had to remember that each conversation is with an individual.
Yeah.
And by that I mean I may have had 4, 5, 6, 7 great conversations and have this go in with this expectation that this will go the way the other 5 or however many have
Mhm.
gone, and just assume that the person will hear it. Or and often, I mean, people I've heard, I've never thought of that, or man, you made
Mhm.
me think of it a different way. And then I've projected that onto this new conversation, this new individual that I'm talking to. And when they just don't get it, it's almost like I've set myself up for disappointment.
Mm.
So I've kind of had to check just my emotions and check my expectations going in and remind myself that there's no guarantee that I will change a person's mind, or that I might not be enlightened and hear something myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are you ever tempted at that moment in time to walk away because they don't get it?
Sometimes it is sometimes unfathomable. I hope I said that right. That people, and it's that people don't get it. And your frustration and your emotions rise too.
Mhm.
And if you really want to have a conversation, if that is the goal, I have to remember, and I have to be calm, and I have to keep my emotions in check so that we can have this conversation. And if I get angry, upset, I have to realize, am I feeding what they already perceive? I don't know. It's just hard because emotions, I mean, it's real. That's a real tender spot. That can be, for a lot of people, your Achilles heel. And
Yeah.
how you react is a big thing.
My general personality, I think, helps in this one. And that I sometimes will just figure a way to keep you talking
Mm-hmm.
and ask enough questions. Because admittedly, once we get to a point I realize you're not hearing me, then once a person shows you who they are, I believe it.
The first time, the
Right.
very first time, yes.
So it may mean I know that, this is a area or a zone we just can't go into,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because my emotions might at some point begin to get the best of me, and if I can see that coming, then it's no longer going to be helpful for either of
Mm-hmm.
us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, both of you, when we were talking earlier, we were thinking through just the idea that we do have to be really careful with our emotions because we feel strongly
Mm-hmm.
about our beliefs, and this thought process of how can you not see this?
Mm-hmm.
How can you not understand this? And yet, for some people, it's never, I mean, they've just not experienced it and they haven't lived in that world. And so now it's this new moment of learning, and where patience, a lot of people don't want patience. It's like, I want to fix it. I want to fix it right this very minute. Tell me what to do. Tell me the action to take, and I'm going to do it. But
Mm-hmm.
this set of circumstances does not lend itself to that. Would you agree?
So as a result, Julie, part of the struggle is when we disagree, I feel like at times you're denying my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. That.
And that is the part that I think really you're like, it's, yes, when I walk into a room and I'm the only Black person and we're looking and trying to scan the audience to figure out, and just the things that go through our mind, and you're telling me it's not real, it's like, what do you do with it?
Mm-hmm.
You're denying my personal experience at that point.
Yeah.
Those are the things that become tough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yet, if you walk away, then there's this void of that perspective and that voice in this relationship.
The key for me is, if it is a friendship and it's a long-standing relationship, my goal is for both of us to learn from the other. This should not be a one-way type of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say, well, I feel guilty. I don't want you to feel guilty. We just need to stay at the table and talk, even when it gets difficult, even when I say something that may challenge what you've heard all your life, what you've been taught all your life. You have to sometimes wrestle with that. And it's not the easy thing, because we just, like you said, we want to fix it. I want to do A, B, and C and come up with D. That's it. This isn't one of those kind of circumstances. We're going to have to wrestle with this for a little while.
And to your point, you know, we talk about in marriage classes sometimes being able to get into a conversation and not know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And getting comfortable. I was talking with a history teacher recently, and we were talking about we can't be scared to start a conversation and not know where that conversation is going to end up. Sometimes the beauty is in the process.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty is in the journey itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
And learning something new that maybe you didn't know or hadn't experienced or hadn't thought about.
Well, it makes me think, even just asking questions. So if someone says, I've never thought about it that way before. I've never actually seen that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that. Then it's a real opportunity to ask some questions and just say, okay, the next time you find yourself in this set of circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to ask yourself these questions, or I want you to think about these things. I mean, I think I just keep going back to, and we've been having this ongoing conversation, that it is an ongoing conversation.
Oh, I believe this is the new talk. This is the talk that is not one talk, but it is multiple. It is in my workplace. How do I handle something that I see? How do I handle a friend of mine saying an off-colored joke? Do I speak to them about that? Or do I allow it to just slide? Or am I shocked that they even said that? You know, it's a new process for all of us. And being able to walk through that is a little uncomfortable, but I honestly believe we've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
And how many times until someone really brings it to our attention, we may not believe it at first, but then we start to see it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I believe that's what's happening. I believe people are starting to see things that they denied before. It's kind of like you buy a car.
Yes.
And now I see, it's like now I see that car all the time once I bought it.
Yes.
But it's not, we get a little bit of trained of what to look for, or what peaks, what kind of triggers, you know, our thought process, our eyesight.
Yeah.
I think we are creatures of comfort. We don't like being in an environment, especially for an extensive period of time, where it feels uncomfortable. And Gena, you talked about guilt. I mean, guilt is like that gift that keeps on
giving. Yes.
It's not productive.
No.
So feeling guilty isn't helpful, other than to say, okay, this doesn't feel good. I need to pay attention. Something's going on here.
It's an awareness.
Yeah.
It's keeping your eyes aware, and I think your ears open to something that you may not have heard. I know I've shared before, but my husband oftentimes would not walk in the neighborhood where we lived because he felt uncomfortable. Yeah. And I would share with him that on the Facebook page of that neighborhood, they would take pictures of people and say, do they belong here? And he was concerned that someone would make a call. And when you walk, you tend not to carry your identification to prove that you live there. So there was a real fear and concern for him in that situation. So sharing that opened a lot of people's eyes, because he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
But he's a big guy.
Yeah. And I have tall sons as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
So being open about experiences and encouraging ongoing dialogue, certainly educating yourself and recognizing, we talk about this a lot just in general about relationships, you can't change somebody. The only person who can change is you.
Right.
So going into a conversation like this, thinking that my goal is to change them, is probably going to result in real frustration on your part.
On actually both parts. Both people will walk away from that conversation frustrated and possibly unwilling to enter it again.
I've heard the statement, a person changed against their will is still of the same opinion.
Oh, that's great.
That's good. That's good.
And so you're right. I've had to make sure I did not go in with the expectation of change or winning the argument or winning.
Well, and let's just say you are in a discussion and it gets heated. I mean, it gets really heated. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when you escalate? So let's say they start escalating and you escalate back. What happens then? And is there a way to actually de-escalate things and bring the conversation back to a place where both parties can be heard? Or is the conversation just over?
Well, you have to start with, there are people that is just how they communicate. And to a degree, is it still focused on information, facts, and the issue at hand, or is it getting personal?
Great.
Because because I have some family members that they just naturally get heated, they get emotional, they get passionate, and sometimes we just have to stay in there. If it's just their way of expressing it, it can be okay. But when it gets to be where no one is hearing anybody, then to your point, we've got to figure out a way to step back and regroup.
Being aware, and sometimes you have to be the person to do this. Make sure you clarify to hear what the other person is saying, because when your emotions do get a little bit raised, you don't always hear what the person is saying. Right. You hear what you thought they said. But if one person could stop and say, hey, let me make sure I heard what you said, that allows actually their brain to kind of calm down to make sure that the conversation doesn't continue to escalate.
To your point, think about it. Lots of times we get escalated because we feel like we're not heard, respected, or valued. And so one of the tricks that we can use is to show you that I am really hearing, valuing, and respecting you right now, with the hopes that will be reciprocated.
I think what you're really talking about is a strategy, because I mean, I know we're not trying to trick anybody. We are really trying to help people have a constructive conversation. Yes. And Reggie, when you feel valued and you feel heard, which goes back to what is your end game? I mean, what is it that you're really trying to accomplish here? Because if you go in with this set agenda about, well, I'm going to come away from this conversation and I'm going to get my point across with the person, it's probably they're not going to feel valued. They're going to feel like they've been lectured.
Right. Yeah. And as a result, you have relationships that don't have to get destroyed, that get destroyed.
Oh, it's such a great point.
And just because I hear you doesn't necessarily mean that I automatically agree with you. I can still make you feel heard and not agree with what you said, but that's still valuing you having the right to have the perspective that you have.
Well, and don't you think in this day and time, we are missing the boat frequently in relationships because we have gotten to this place where if you don't see it like I see it, you're dead wrong and we cannot be in relationship.
And I think we have come to a point where we are surrounded by a lot of people who think exactly like we do. And it gets more and more difficult when you hear a dissonant voice. It just sounds so wrong to your ear that you automatically disregard it. I enjoy being around people who think differently than me, who like it makes me better. But that's a conscious choice that I've made. And I just think I've gotten uncomfortable. I've gotten comfortable being uncomfortable. So I just can sometimes lovingly challenge people. It's okay to be with people who don't agree with you line by line by line. We often say if you both are exactly the same, one of you all is unnecessary. I like to be challenged, but again, it's back to the goal of the relationship. Do we want to get better? Do I want to know more about you? Do I want to really learn what's going on with you? And I have to be open for that.
Sometimes that process allows a person to get to know you, and it
Mm-hmm.
just helps that you them get to know your experience, and helps them
Mm-hmm.
get to see the world through, maybe through your lens,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
beneficial.
Well, and I just thank you guys for being willing to have this conversation, because we have built a relationship that's been over time,
Mm-hmm.
and there's there's an environment where we are curious and we do want to learn and we do want to grow. And the keys that you have talked about today, the strategies to really coming to a conversation with someone who disagrees with you about race, I think are useful and helpful to move us to a different place that perhaps would allow all of us to grow and be different and teach generations to come a different way of living together.
Mm-hmm.
So thank
Well
you.
said. Well said.
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Julie.
Yes, thanks.